So we've wired everything through our emulator. That's looking pretty good. Let's build something in the block controller. All right, let's go down to our UCI controller, block controller again. I've left these buttons out here. I'm going to delete these really quickly. Those don't need to exist anymore. And back into our script for our UCI layer controller. We've already built a lot of this in the last couple sections, right? This is our good old familiar reset all layers and buttons function. So what's the first thing we got to do? Well, we've added a new layer to our UCI, haven't we? We've now got that layer 350. That's part of the layers that we always want to reset, right? No matter what, whenever you navigate around, one of the things that we're doing right here is resetting all layers and buttons. Let's make sure we're resetting that layer too. So I'm going to go in here and duplicate my set UCI layer visibility block. And I'm going to add that we should be hiding number 350. Because by default, we just want to make sure that that is hidden, no matter what they're doing. And we only needed to do that once, right? When we first built our event handlers and we had 3 separate event handlers, we would have had to add this to all 3 of those event handlers. And we probably would have forgotten to do that. Here's a great example of how, as your program evolves, it makes it easier on your coding life later on to think with functions earlier in your design game. This made it real easy to update. That will happen every time every single button is pressed. That's lovely. Okay, so now we need to, all right, we got to think this through. What's going to happen? When they navigate to the camera tab, we need to make an evaluation. If the USB cable is connected, we're going to do one thing. If it's not connected, we're going to do another thing. That's telling me that we're going to need an if-else statement, because there's 2 conditions that could possibly be true. And all of this is going to take place down here when the button that was pressed equals number 3, right? So that means I'm going to grab an if-else statement and I'm going to shove it inside this other if-else statement that starts to get like a lot of stacking if-else statements inside of each other. That's not my favorite way to do it. Let's make another function. Let's separate all this into its own function just to keep it clean. So let's scroll on down to the bottom, make a brand new function for ourselves. We'll go to the functions branch, grab a define function, do something, and let's call this one, what's it going to do? It's going to either show camera layer or USB warning. It's a pretty good name for the function because that's exactly what it's going to do. And let's build our if-else statements into this function, and then we'll have our other function recall this function as it gets to the right place. That'll just kind of keep things separated and easier to read. I've always said it. What are we going to do every time we think through our code? We're going to think it through with comments and debug along the way. I'm going to say those two things like 1,000 times during the course of this. Think it through with comments, debug along the way. All right, so let's think it through with comments first. Go to our System tab, think it through with comments. What is going to happen? Let's see. In fact, if you're the kind of person who likes a visual aid, it may help to see this in a flowchart. So here's what it's going to look like. If the user connects the USB cable, then that navigates them to the Cameras tab. Okay? If they navigate to the Camera tab with their finger on the touchscreen itself, well, then we have a question point. First of all, is the USB cable connected? If it is, then we're going to show the camera layer normally. If it's not, then we're going to show that USB warning layer. And then if they disconnect the USB cable, okay, well now, again, we have to ask ourselves a question. Is the UCI already on the camera tab? If it is, well then we're going to show them that USB warning label again. And if it's not, then we're going to do nothing. Okay, so now we've got our instructions clear, let's add this to our comments blocks. If the USB is connected, we're going to navigate to the layer normally and hide the warning layer, right? Those are all the things that need to happen. Let's duplicate this. What's our second thought? Let's see. If the USB is disconnected, then we want to show the warning layer and hide the camera controls, right? That's what we've thought it through in our normal parlance. Let's figure out what that means in blocks. Let's grab an if statement to start off with. Back in flow control, grab your if do, snap it on in here. Our first comment's going to go in the first mouth. We know we're going to need a secondary condition, so we'll click on the cog to create a secondary condition. In this case, I'm not going to use an else if. I'm going to use the else, because there's really only two possible conditions. Condition 1 is that the USB is connected. Condition 2 is that it is disconnected. There's no other third ghost state like Patrick currently exists in, right? You're either alive or you're dead. Patrick has found the ephemeral third option somehow.
Yeah, I would have. Okay.
Perfect. I'm glad you're here. So,
I was trying to get the ethereal, and then I knew that anything that I was going to say was going to offend somebody, and so I just said nothing.
Ethereal is a very hot topic button.
Yeah.
Hot topic word. Can't say ethereal. So we know it's either this or that. So we don't need a second else if. We don't need to reevaluate. Is the thing off? Because we can just do it with an else. It means every other possible condition will be satisfied over here. So that goes into our second mouth. If the USB is connected, we can go to our controls, grab that LED that we just input into our block controller. That's the LED USB connected. Now, you may think to yourself, do I have to go and grab, okay, I need to evaluate whether the Boolean state is on. So that means I need to get an operator. Do I have to say, kind of like what we did like up here, deciding, hey, is the button that was pressed equal to this? So do I have to say, okay, is the LED Boolean equal to true? Then we do it. You could do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. That's 3 blocks. We could actually accomplish this with 1 block. How? Well, keep in mind, all we're looking for, the entirety of this yellow block, all we're looking for is whether or not this yellow block equals true or if it equals false. And right now we're asking, is this thing equal to true? And if it is equal to true, then the yellow block equals true. Well, if this thing equals true, we don't need any of this. Let's just look at the thing. Let's just look at the Boolean directly, because this Boolean is literally the word true, if it's true. So I don't need to compare and ask, is true true? Because true is always true. True is true, and the world runs on truth. I wish. Not really anymore. That's a different subject.
Nate, you can't handle the true.
Thank you. You need me on that function. Anyways, so we're evaluating, is it Boolean? Is it true? And if it's not, it goes to else. Really simple, just a couple blocks here. If it is Boolean, then we're going to make the changes on our UCI. So now we'll go and we'll grab, I'll just duplicate these UCI blocks from up here and drag it on here because it's already got the right UCI selected and the right page and everything. So if it is true, then we are going to what? We're going to show layer 300 like we wanted to, and then we're going to hide number 350. And if it is not true, then we're going to hide 300, and we're going to show 350. Voila. Okay, that's pretty good. Don't forget to debug. We always want to debug. So let's debug in here as well. So we're going to say, grab your system, debug prints. Let's say, and I'll grab a real string block rather than the ghost block. Patrick has got me worried about ghosts and what they're going to do and who they're going to offend. So I don't want any ghost blocks. I'm going to do a Ghostbusters edition here where there's no Patrick involved. So this is going to say, showing the camera layer because USB is connected, something like that. And then we'll duplicate this down here for showing warning layer because USB is disconnected. And that's not so bad. Okay, now we can take this whole function and we got to insert it into our main function up here that's recalling whenever the navigation buttons are pressed. We look for down here. This is what happens when the third button was pressed, when we get the cameras layer. We no longer are going to do this, right? Let's pull this out of there. We are no longer necessarily showing layer 300. So I'm going to delete that layer. Instead, we have to run the function that determines if the USB is connected. So let's grab our function of show camera layer or USB warning and snap that in there instead. Now when the button is pressed, it's going to get to this point in the line code, stop, run down, and run through all of this behavior. And when it's done, it comes back up, and then it's it sets its button on and it debug prints the way that it should. That's what we like. So let's test it. I'm going to hop into emulation mode real quick. And let me arrange my two UCI so you can see everything. I'm going to just split my screen like so. I am going to navigate to the cameras tab. Currently, my USB is not connected. Let's turn the lights on so it's not quite so creepy. If the lights are off, that's when Patrick's in there. You're haunting our
Who are you going to call? Ghost blockers.
Were you waiting like 2 minutes for that one?
I wrote that down.
I'm so glad. All right, we're going to the cameras tab. And look, it tells us, hey, where's your camera, fellas and ladies? Folks, please, the perfect message from the beyond that Patrick has set up for us.
You're welcome.
And that's because the USB was not connected. Let's get away from that page. This time we'll connect the USB. And this time if we go to the cameras tab, we successfully correctly see the camera's information. So it's working. We're halfway there. We're only halfway there. Right now it's working when you go to that page. But right now, if you disconnect the USB while we're on the page, nothing happens. We need to anticipate what's going to happen for that automation as well. So that's the next step.